Good evening and welcome to the August 21st, 2019 Wyndham-Raymond School District Board of Directors meeting. Mr. Howell?
Roll call. Kate Bricks.
Present.
Eric Colby.
Present.
Jenny Cummings.
Present.
Don Dillon. Marge Gavoni.
Here.
Pete Hensler. Anna Keeney.
Here.
Kate Levier.
Here.
Scott McLean.
Here.
Will you all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Howell, are there any adjustments to the agenda?
There are not any adjustments to the agenda.
Okay. It is now time for public input, which is an opportunity for the public to comment on items not on the agenda. Okay, public. It's now the opportunity to hear testimony regarding the use of CNN 10 as an instructional resource in the district. Somebody said my name. Oh, pardon me? Oh, sorry. I went right over you, and I should not. My glasses are, I need to do
Your
this.
hearing is good though, because I did not say your name very loud.
I was a first grade teacher. I hear everything. Okay. Mr. Howell.
Sure. It's my pleasure to introduce tonight to the greater RSU 14 community, Christine Frost-Burtnay, who's been in the office now since July 1 and then had a wonderful trip to pick up her son at a Luthier school in southwestern England. But we've had the opportunity to work together over the past month, and it's been a great start already having her in the office. Just a little bit about Christine, for those of you who have not had a chance to meet her. She has worked as a middle-level English language arts teacher, and in that role in RSU 57, her teaching partner was now the current Deputy Commissioner of Education.
Wow.
And so has some connections there, but she's also been a high school teacher in Gorham, an elementary assistant principal, and most recently served as an elementary principal at Waterboro Elementary School. Over the 20 years she's served in public education, she's developed quite a reputation for being an open and honest educator who's a great problem solver, who works really, really hard to support both staff and students, and very excited to have her as a working partner in central office.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. I cannot express enough, I've been saying it a lot over the last month, but the warm, inviting welcome I have received has been amazing. And so I can tell that this is a wonderful place to teach and learn and work and partner with the communities of Wyndham and Raymond. I'm very excited to do so. I appreciate the intro. Some of the work that I did at Waterboro Elementary School in particular, and that I'm passionate about, is proficiency-based education and thinking about authentic experiential learning design so that all children are engaged and ignited in inquiry and deep learning. I did a lot of work with farm-to-school programming and thinking about how we can support children with that experiential learning out in greenhouses and gardens, and again partnering with their community to give them a sense of connection to the school community. Also working really closely with staff on unit development and design so that they really are thoughtful and ready to hook learners in. So I'm excited to bring a lot of that work and knowledge and experience and partnering with this outstanding administrative team and the communities. But really it's just been about creating diverse pathways so all kids are engaged and have a real authentic sense of the learning as it ties out to their community and certainly the global community at large. So I'm excited to be here and looking forward to this partnership.
Welcome.
Welcome is right. Now, can I move on to the other one? Okay. We're going to hear testimony regarding a challenge to the use of CNN 10 as an instructional resource in the district. The purpose of this hearing is to evaluate this resource and whether or not the resource should be used in RSU 14. Policy IJJ outlines the process that will be used to review materials. Tonight, we will have the opportunity to hear from Mr. Clark, who is making the complaint, and from a committee that was appointed by the superintendent to evaluate the material. Before we get started, I'd like to read from the policy. The Board of Directors recognizes that it is the primary objective of the library media centers and the instructional program in our schools to implement, enrich, and support the educational program of the schools. In preparing students to meet the content standards of the learning results in the Common Core State Standards, in supporting the achievement of the RSU 14 students' interest and contribute to a desire for lifelong learning, and providing enrichment opportunities that expand students' interest and contribute to a desire for lifelong learning, it is the duty of the library media centers and the instructional program to provide a wide range of materials on all levels of difficulty, with diversity of appeal and the presentation of different points of view. While the board retains its authority to approve the selection of instructional materials, it recognizes the educational expertise of its professional staff and the need for such staff to be involved in the recommendation of instructional materials. The board delegates responsibility for the selection of instructional materials and library media resources to the professionally trained personnel employed by the district, subject to the criteria and procedures for selection and the board's policy on challenged materials as described below. To this end, the Board of Directors asserts that the responsibility of the school library media center and the instructional program is A, support achievement of the content standards of the learning results and the Common Core State Standards. B, support the goals and objectives of the RSU's 14's educational programs. C, to provide materials that will enrich and support the curriculum, taking into consideration the varied interests, abilities, and maturity levels of the students served. D, to provide materials that will stimulate growth in factual knowledge, literary appreciation, aesthetic values, and ethical standards. E, to provide materials on opposing sides of controversial issues to enable students to develop a capability for critical analysis. F, to foster respect and appreciation for cultural diversity and various opinions by providing materials representative of the many religious, ethnic, and cultural groups and their contributions to our American heritage, and to provide a background of information which will enable students to make intelligent judgments in their daily lives. H, be accurate and current. I, reflect high-quality scholarship and presentation. J, respect the constraints of the RSU 14 budget. K, software, multimedia materials, and online internet resources should be considered for the purpose of use, content, format, degree of interactivity or student involvement, appropriate use of graphics, sound, and animation, feedback provided, and ease of use. Library media center materials will not be removed from the collection because of a criticism, except in accordance with board policy. In addition, the board recognizes that the final authority as to what materials an individual student will be exposed to rests with that student's parents or guardians. However, at no time will the wishes of one child's parents to restrict his or her reading or viewing of a particular item infringe on other parents' rights to permit their children to read or view the same material. The responsibility for selection of instructional and library materials. The board is legally responsible for all matters relating to the operation of the schools. The responsibility for the selection of instructional materials is delegated to the professionally trained personnel employed by the board. Selection of materials for the library media centers and the instructional program involves many people: principals, teachers, department heads, students, and community members. The responsibility for the coordination of the selection of library and instructional materials and the recommendation for purchase rests with professionally trained professionally trained personnel. They could be strained too. The board is responsible to approve a uniform system of textbooks. Challenged materials. Despite the care taken to select materials for student and teacher use and the qualifications of the persons who select the materials, it is recognized that occasional objections may be raised by community members, parents, students, or school staff. Now, for the process of challenging materials, Mr. Howell, will you please explain the steps?
Sure, and I'm just actually going over the process that's actually done in policy and just giving you a few ideas of what's been taken to date. So a complaint was brought forward for the use of CNN 10 in our classrooms at Wyndham Middle School. Mr. Clark brought that complaint to Mr. Patton, and following the policy, a copy of the Citizens Challenged Educational Media Form was forwarded to Mr. Clark. That was then filled out, and I believe that form has been put into your packet so that you have a copy. And from that, Mr. Prince put together a committee, and that committee was composed of the following people. Principal at the appropriate grade level, a librarian, media specialist, a classroom teacher, department head in the subject of the challenge materials, and a community member. And so that group met together and wrote a report, which we'll get a chance to review tonight. The charge to the committee: the review committee shall read and examine the materials referred to them, check general acceptance of materials by reading reviews, weigh values and faults against each other, and form opinions based on the material as a whole and not on passages or portions pulled out of context. Meet to discuss the material and prepare a written report in a timely manner. The report is before to the superintendent, and then the complainant was basically informed of those results. And under the policy, the person who, if they're not satisfied with the superintendent's decision, has the ability to bring it to the board, and the board has the ability to set aside a portion of a regular meeting, which we're here tonight, to hear testimony on the complaint.
Okay, and so tonight we'll have the opportunity to hear an appeal of the committee's decision to allow CNN 10 to remain as a resource for students and staff at RSU 14. And the process that we'll follow for tonight will be, first, we will have the opportunity to hear from Mr. Clark. Second, we will have the opportunity to hear from representatives of the committee who researched the materials and developed the report for the superintendent. And third, time will be allotted at the next Board of Directors meeting on September 4th for public comment about this issue. It will be at that time that the board will vote on whether or not they agree with the report of the committee. Before we begin testimony, I want to read one final section of Policy IJJ that outlines the manner in which the board should consider the testimony they're going to hear. The material in question shall be reviewed objectively and in its full content, evaluated in terms of the needs and interest of students, school, curriculum, and community. 3, considered in the light of differing opinions, and 4, reviewed in light of the criteria for initial selection and purpose as provided herein. Mr. Clark, could you come to the podium to share your concerns?
Thank you all for having me. I can tell you how I got here. I'm sure I don't really want to be here. I'm not good at this kind of stuff, but I think it's important for my family and perhaps others as well. I was in the office one day and my daughter came home from school, and I just asked her how was school and what they do today, and she said that they watched the news, and I asked her what news it was, and she said CNN, and then they talked about current events, based on, I guess, the information they received. I, again, probably wish that there was another, I just felt it should balance, okay, and I wasn't getting that. So from there, I called, I emailed Drew Patton, and he was great, responded back to me, and he indicated that there was a common sense media that they use as a guide, where much of the media content comes from, and he thought this site with a review of different news outlets may be helpful, which it was. I mean, that was the common sense media, I guess, is where these sources are derived from, but in actuality, what the children were watching was the CNN 10 video, and the whole time that you watch it, CNN was branded in the lower right-hand corner of the video. And that's kind of what brought me to kind of this point here is that my concern is not with Common Sense Media, it's the fact that CNN 10 is being shown in the classroom, which in turn teaches the kids, or would advise the kids that this is their news source. And I just think they're at too young and impressionable age to be saying that here's your news source, and also where it's promoting CNN for kids, to me is something that I know the group felt that it was approved for kids, and they mentioned that Fox News, as an example of another news source, didn't have anything for kids. But I've got to say honestly that Fox News isn't going to say anything that the kids haven't heard in the school system and haven't been exposed to, certainly nothing worse. So I think the for kids thing, we should negate that altogether, because again, Fox News isn't going to say anything that I know my kid has been seen and heard of going around the school system. No, it's not a great school system. I do think it is. My kids have been very successful there, and I do appreciate you all do, everything you guys do. So, I guess from a philosophical standpoint, I think we all have to agree as adults in this world that there is different sources of news with different slants, different takes on it. It's just the reality of where we are today, and I think we all have to come to that conclusion that that is a true statement. And so, again, that in this present day, media sources can be biased, and they're trying to put forth information in an effort to instill their own ideologies into the children and adults in hopes of them embracing it. That being said, I do not have an issue with my child watching CNN. However, if they are going to be watching CNN, which is a biased liberal news media source, in turn, they should have equal time to watch Fox News so they may be informed of a news source that reflects conservative values. And that, to me, I think is fair. If you're going to show one, you show the other. And again, I just want to revert back to what I said earlier, that because Fox News doesn't have a Fox News for kids, that should not negate it from being shown in the classroom, because, again, that to me just isn't relevant. Let's see. I guess I have some information. I've talked to some people about this, and, the folks I talked to really have a lot to say about it. I just saw that report tonight that was put together from the committee, and respectively, they viewed the video, because I sat down and watched the video with my daughter, watched it on my own. My view was that it was slanted one way. Your view is that it wasn't. And that's one of these things that you can talk about all day, and you're just going around in a circle. And again, I just feel it's absolutely important that children, to be properly educated, have both sides. And that's only going to instill more information from them. It's going to make them learn that everything they hear from a source they should put a shield up to and not just believe. It's going to educate them better. They're going to have more inspired discussions in the classroom and not just get on one row that's kind of humdrum. It's just a way to teach and inform and bring more life, I guess, into the classroom, or have kids be able to take what facts they want and support the data and bring it forth. Just doing it by one source isn't unfortunately how the world is today. Maybe back in the day it was, here's a fact, and that was it. There wasn't this instrumental curve on it. So I have, if you think it's appropriate, I can read a couple statements I received from the public, or I just learned tonight that there's another public hearing September 4th. That's a more appropriate time to do that. We can.
I would think that, if I may speak,
Please.
I would think, and I would defer, of course, to Mr. Howell, who really has the knowledge about this.
Mm-hmm.
My thought would be that if they wanted to come and talk at that time, that would be a good opportunity for them to do that.
Okay. And if they can, I could read their statements at that time.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think
so everyone's schedules
that's a
are
good
busy,
idea.
so.
Okay.
Okay. So I guess in closing, I was just say I'd ask the board to expose the children to liberal and conservative media sources equally, and that's my wish, or or not at all. That's my thought process.
Okay.
Okay.
Just a second.
Sure.
Does anybody in the board have a question for Mr. Clark? Or any concerns?
I just have one, and it's only clarification, because I don't know, maybe mine didn't copy to it. What, on 7,
This is in your complaint.
in your complaint?
Okay. Yeah. Sorry with my handwriting.
That's okay.
I was one of
You're
these. I was one of these moods.
Yeah, but it doesn't always copy. And I just wanted to make sure that that the 3 words say what I think they say. Does that say liberals, Democrats, and socialists? Do you want to see it?
I usually type things with that.
The question was, what do you believe that I, as a first grade teacher, I'm a reader of bad handwriting.
That's a hit. I'll take it. I agree.
The question was,
A lot of skills.
What a
for
shot
that
across
first
the
grade
bow
teacher.
that was, but it's well taken.
What do you believe is the theme and intention and the intention of this material? And your answer was, turn our kids into liberals, Democrats, and socialists.
For what age group would you recommend this material?
No,
No, number
number 7.
7. What do you believe this theme and/or intention of this material? Democrats, socialists. Yeah, I guess I wrote that at the time, and I'll stand by it. I mean,
Okay, I just want a clarification on what it said.
Yes. Yep. Yep.
Okay, thank
Because
you.
there are different philosophies, and
Okay.
yeah. Okay.
And I just have and
Yes.
my apologies if you mentioned this. What grade is your daughter in?
I'd honestly rather even not mention
Okay,
who
no,
she
no,
is,
that's fine.
honestly,
Oh, no,
because
no,
she
we-
started
I was
talking
just
about it
thinking
and she was
relevant
shunned
age.
down when she
Okay.
started bringing up her views in class, and
Okay,
that's
no,
really what
that's-
fired me up and probably why I was writing that way. So I wish that she didn't want me to do this.
I was just thinking more age-wise as far as looking at another
be-
media source,
she was in
and
8th
I
grade.
would want to make sure that it's appropriate for that age. I'm a parent of a young kid, so I just didn't know how.
She was
I
in 8th
assumed
grade.
middle school, obviously.
She was in
but-
8th grade, yeah, at the
Yeah.
time. And I guess to follow up what you just said, like you mean an appropriate media source, a different media source? Are you
No,
coming
no, I
back
was
with the for
just-
children thing, or?
No, just
Nope.
because you were saying how you thought what is seen on Fox is fine for the age that your daughter
Yes.
is in that age group. And
Yes.
I was just thinking if there were 6th graders, maybe it wouldn't be. I'm also come from a parent of I have a 2nd grader, so she's not watching news.
Yeah, right.
You know, and I know you're not thinking that age bracket, but I was just trying to get it into context, that's all.
Right. No, the CNN 10 for kids that I saw was, to me, the same message, only they were talking in a, hunky-dory kind of voice to be influential to kids. And I hear what you're saying, and I agree. There should be an age maybe where we as adults shouldn't be exposed to this stuff, but maybe there's an age where when it's brought in, maybe it's 8th grade and it's both at the same time. So I think what you're saying, is there an age level where it should start? Yeah,
There's
it
a big
shouldn't start
difference
with one
between
and
a
not the
6th
other.
grader and an 8th grader maturity. I mean, Drew sees that every day.
Right.
So that's just where I was going.
Yeah, but
in
wherever-
thinking about
We hope.
a balanced approach to this. That's just what I was
Yeah,
trying to think
exactly.
of. Yep.
Yeah. Or if it's brought in, it would be both at the same time, or not. Yeah.
So my question may be for committee, so this conversation is going further?
We will have a presentation from the committee.
Yeah.
And after that, then we can ask the committee, or ask the representatives of the committee any questions. And then we will vote. We make a practice of giving the information one day and voting the next time, and we'll vote the next time. And at the next time, if there are people who are from the community who want to speak, they have the opportunity at the public comment section to do that.
Okay, but this isn't the time to do it?
No.
Okay,
No, this is just the presentation of the testimony.
very good.
Mrs. Briggs?
Just process-wise, were you afforded the opportunity to re-explain the policy whereby you could exempt your daughter, or your child, let's put your child, let's make her anonymous, from viewing this? I can't remember the letters.
I could have. I
Yeah.
don't know is my honest answer.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was.
Everyone was great working through this
Yeah,
process.
yeah.
I
No,
can
no,
say
I'm
that.
just-
Everyone
I'm
was
just
like, "Yep,
following
Ken, what you got? Let's hear it. Here's
procedure
what you do." That was all very well taken. They could have informed me, and if they had, honestly, I would have probably taken this route because I think all kids benefit from different
Yeah,
sources
no,
of
no,
information.
I'm not objecting to you
Yep.
taking this route. I just
make sure
want to
it's
make
followed.
sure
Yeah.
that, if you wouldn't mind just answering that question.
Sure,
Mr.
and again, working with Ken on this, I think the conversation that I remember was about that piece until we get things settled, if he wanted to opt his child out of that. But at that point in time, I think Ken's concern was not bringing light to his child, particularly in that setting. And that he wanted to go through this process in order to reach a resolution.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then part of it is forwarding the policy, which of course is long, and then also working together. This is the first one that I had fielded, so making sure that I understood what needed to take place, and also try to work through that together in terms of what does this mean, what does that mean. There was some consultation with Mr. Howell as well. So I think there were probably 3 or 4 phone conversations kind of throughout until we got to this particular point.
Perfect. I don't want to muddy the water here. It was just a question I had.
Last thing for
Yes,
me,
sir.
I think.
Yes.
So this part here, the policy IJJ, is in place as we speak. So these pieces that I underlined, like different points of view, opposing sides, what's the teeth in that? Because I, as a parent, don't think that really happens in most cases in the classroom. Is that something we go further in the discussion? Should I just file my own complaint? What would we do on that?
I think this point is not specific to this.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's specific
All right.
to this
I'll
challenge.
I'll
But
table
it's certainly
aside.
something we should be aware of.
And if I could just bring us back to the policy, and that's actually the reason why we're here tonight. The policy is specific to this specific piece of material, and so really the purpose of hearing it is whether or not CNN 10 should continue to be a resource to either provide a balance or even be used as a resource. And so really what the board needs to look at through this policy is that either yes, it can be used as a resource, and then how that resource is used and whether or not balance is provided, or no, it should not be used as a resource, and therefore none of the teachers in RSU 14 can access CNN 10 as a resource. So I think that's where the policy brings us to.
In that case, but it's still a policy applicable to all things.
Correct.
Which I would probably want to speak to somebody on.
Okay, all right. Thank
May
you,
I-
Ms.
I
Scott?
ask one question?
Yes.
Your primary complaint, I just want to make sure I understand this, is that CNN 10 is biased from their political viewpoints. Is that what I understand? Is that your primary?
My concern, I guess, is that students are receiving one source of information, and different sources of information should be available to students to be properly educated.
Okay. Do you mind if I ask, you've obviously watched a few episodes of the CNN 10.
Yeah,
Do you mind if I ask how many episodes you've watched?
I watched 2. I watched the exact one my daughter watched in the classroom, and then I clicked on that same resource and was absolutely appalled when they showed the comedians doing their rip on politicians. It was insulting. What they were making jokes, and this is all what the kids have access to with the click, and that's where all the kids go these days.
Okay.
So from my point, they go to the classroom, CNN 10 is where I get my news, then they go to CNN 10, I'll look at the clips, and oh, here's some funny stuff I can hear about the president, or whoever else it may be, for that
Okay.
matter. That's the source part that really bothers me.
Right. Do you know the date that episode aired?
March 24th.
I've got a link to it here.
I'm sorry?
March 24th.
Let's see. Yeah, I mean, if you have it, that's great.
Yes.
I have the actual link. I said, here's a clip that was shown in the classroom recently,
Yes.
and I've got it here.
I provided it to you with the,
Okay, this is the one. Okay.
Right.
And like I said, when you keep clicking on there and
right.
see the comedians, that was even,
Can I just add one clarification
Yes.
for the board, is that for that particular resource, CNN 10, if you use the live show or whatever version's going to be that day, the trailers that I think you're referring to on the side aren't there. But Mr. Clark is right, when you go to the archives to then watch a past episode, then trailers and ads, much like you were on a CNN 10, or if you were on the Press Herald site, or if you were on Fox News site, all those things that run in the periphery then start to appear. So he's absolutely correct. So when you watch the news program, they're not there. When you go back to the archives and then want to research, then things start to appear.
Okay.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Okay, as soon as we say, okay. No,
this is
everybody
fun.
pops out.
Answering questions is easier than speaking, so I'm good, right?
Not you. There's all these people are doing it. Yes, Mrs. Briggs.
I just want to keep you on your toes.
Yes, I know.
I know I'm drilling down, but is CNN 10 presented to the students on their laptops, or is it on a screen overhead? It's overhead?
To my knowledge, for the middle school, it's and that's something that we've tried to move towards. In terms in terms of the middle school, the answer to that be yes, it would be presented on an LCD. We've been trying to move for that very reason to when we're showing media that it's done in one manner by the teacher and not with students going, you know, if we say go to YouTube and check this out,
Right,
then we
right.
lose sort of all of the focus on the content.
Right, it's, I don't wanna.
It's
I
put
don't
up
wanna-
on an LCD projector with sound
And the entire class.
in the entire class.
And so there's no opportunity afterwards. They just go on to their instruction.
Yes, typically there's,
Yep.
in good instruction, there'd be discussion about the current events, you know, looking at pros and cons, those pieces. But
Yep.
again, the how much that happens in every classroom, that's not something that we've taken data on.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's like popcorn.
I know. Okay, all right, okay, so in line with what you just said then, so if a student was to go on their computer and bring up CNN 10, they would do it on their own? It wouldn't be connected to what necessarily was shown on the overhead?
My understanding is that we have not asked, we've not directed kids there as a sole source. Usually it's been my understanding from what I've seen and the data that we've collected, it has been a complement to social studies class in terms of current events and not something that's tied to individual work.
Okay, so they would also, in the same vein, any student would have the opportunity to go into Fox or any other news program out there on their own, in the same respect.
Yes, I think what we try to do at the middle level is to make
Which,
sure
not
that.
you, I'm not saying nobody's sending them there, I'm just saying.
Exactly.
Okay.
That if there was free time, none of those sites aren't restricted sites, so to say.
Okay, thank
So
you.
yes, if someone was looking
I'm
at
done.
different news outlets, they would have the same opportunity in terms of depending on what they decided to search.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, does anybody have any questions for Mr. Clark?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
if I could just follow up on that a little bit, I mean, the kids go to the class to learn, and what they're seeing is CNN to get the news from. And so that's where they're gonna go. You know what I mean? They learn from the teachers, they respect the teachers. This is what the teachers show me, this is where I go to get my information. They're not even aware Fox exists for that matter. So that's why, you know, that I feel that if you're gonna show one, you gotta show the other, just to raise awareness of it. It's my thought process and why I brought that part up. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Their next meeting, for your information, is at the Wyndham Town Council.
Yep.
And it will be at 6:30 on the 4th.
Okay, all right.
Okay, could I now have the representatives from the committee who received the challenge? Actually, I'm supposed to ask Mr. Howell to ask you to do that.
You did a great job.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so good evening, and thank you, Mr. Clark. This has been a really great experience, and in line with what we do, especially with policy, I was charged by Mr. Prince to oversee the committee and follow the policy guidelines and answer the questions given to us through the policy. And so we did have a representative. We met on April 10th, and we had representatives from our media library specialists, a classroom teacher, a department head, Mr. Patton, and myself, and a community member involved. And so we took Mr. Clark's complaint. He, provided us the information of what the reason was, and we provided this report to Mr. Prince on April 24th. And so a little bit of history of Wyndham Middle School is that it used to be that a long time ago, Channel 1 was like the thing at Wyndham Middle School. They were given a grant and every room had a TV, and Channel 1 was the news for that piece. And so that Channel 1 went away. My own children had seen that. And so some of the teachers use CNN 10 in social studies as a warm-up to current events. And, for many of the reasons Mr. Clark has spoke of, teachers feel it's a 10-minute show. It is a little quirky. It gives science, social studies, political, arts. It's a whole jumbled up show, which could give you a headache if you're an adult watching it, because it really is focused on getting, middle school kids to hear a lot of things. So we took apart each of the pieces. The first thing we do, we are a common sense media school through digital citizenship, is we went to look how they rated CNN 10. And they gave the platform a 3 out of 5 stars. And the only reason it wasn't the 5 stars is because 2 stars were knocked down because it's not an interactive piece. Which was a great question that Mr. Clark asked, is how do kids see this? Yes, it's projected up there. It's information that the students are receiving. It's not an interactive piece that students do. It did agree that it was middle school appropriate for students between the content and all the pictures. We also dug a little deeper, and Civics Educator does a bias report. Their final verdict, and I have the link here, is it is not biased. It provides a balanced choice of stories in that piece. So again, as a committee, we are looking to just find evidence and look at the pieces on there. So as our committee, we felt that this is an educational tool, and it's our job to expose the content to students. Our job is to follow up and talk about how it is presented, and it's used for education and conversation. It shows that there are different sides and opinions. We didn't have the exact date that was questionable. We went through everything in March and April, and speaking with Mr. Patton, we knew the complaint had come through around the end of March, so we went through there, and we viewed clips and transcripts. And Mr. Clark is correct. If you go looking for something in the archive, you have the banners and you have other things that are around it. We did go back to the policy guidelines that Mrs. Cummings had read to us, and we felt at this time that we did not see anything that it violated the policy that is written by RSU 14. We did as a committee, however, look at the suggestion to use Fox, and there is not a Fox children's show or student show. One of the things with the student show with CNN is it's only 10 minutes long. And if we were to watch Fox, it's the half-hour show or whoever's show. So we were just looking to see, is there something comparable that would be to, as Mr. Clark suggested, we looked right into Fox because that was one he noticed. We also looked at adding a piece to the policy just to get a little bit more clarification to help us as committee members. One of the next steps we did was we put out a survey to the middle school teachers at how many staff are using it and what content areas. And so we had 38% of CNN being used in the classrooms. 8 of those were in social studies. And so our library media specialist is doing an awful lot of work with students in information technology, and she also provides other current event sources for teachers to use. And we've also reminded staff to have the dialogue, as Mr. Patton said. And the other piece that we have is through this work that Mr. Clark has asked us to review and look at, we always want to improve on our practice. And so actually the library specialist at the middle school has us linked up now with what's called Discovery Education, which is another platform that we can look at to use. It is a paid video source, and it was used in her former middle school library in Vermont. And so the content is even shorter, 1 or 2 minutes shorter than CNN 10, and it's less complex and in-depth. And so that's another piece that we are looking at if we look at substitute. But again, the way the policy is written, we want to make sure that we adhere to the steps that Mr. Clark has brought forward. These are the findings of our committee work, and we were charged with deciding and making a recommendation whether we felt it violated the policy. And at this time, we do not feel that the information that we researched violated the policy in this case. And we have the follow-up steps in our notes. So we're happy, the committee would be happy to do any other steps that the board wishes us to do in this place, but that is our findings as we come through. So, do you want to add anything?
No, you did a great job.
Does anyone have any, Mr.?
So the first paragraph of policy IJJ, at the end of it, it says and the presentation of different points of view. So where it doesn't violate the policy, is it meeting that criteria of providing another point of view?
So we were only asked to look at one transcript. So there's one point of view in that transcript. If you go to another day, there's going to be another view on something on another topic. So Eric, I think that that's a piece that, I don't think it shows one view and then the next view in the next 2 minutes. It's looking at it as a global piece. And again, we can only attend to the one section of that complaint.
Over time, we could have a long, if it is deemed, I'm not saying it is, if it is deemed one point of view, it wouldn't be with policy to not provide another point of view.
I think there's some minutia there in terms of what you consider to be a point of view. If you're looking at a point of view as the news source, then certainly it's hard to argue that, you know, another source of news covered the same type of topics. When you watch CNN 10, what I've seen of that being in the classroom setting, and whether it's in a 6th grade classroom, a 7th or an 8th grade classroom, is that I'll follow up with this a little bit more, but things tend to be what I consider to be factual. You know, this happened in this country. You know, this debate is going on. Now, certainly within that, there's no doubt that if we probably examine that closer, there may be wording that's used or ways in which things are said that someone may find to be slanted in a particular direction or a particular point of view. I think what is different is that CNN 10 does not tend to be at all what we call news pundits, that, you know, whether you're talking about you know, a CNN pundit or a Fox News pundit who are getting other people on the show, interviewing them, and really giving their sort of personality as it comes to delivering the news. But again, I want to acknowledge that I'm sure if you watch those clips, people may find their perception of how a particular story has come across or to be slanted in one way or the other. I don't know if that
It kind of does. I mean, I talked to a few kids that have come through that, some that are probably more conservative than Mr. Clark, and they didn't find it that big of a, you know, like regular CNN would be to them. However, particular teachers can then emphasize that point of view to their slant harder than the TV show does. And so there's more of this in some of the other areas that I might talk about some other time. I don't want to monopolize, but I mean, like, I see a concern for students that may be on a different side of the ideology.
And I agree wholeheartedly with you in terms of the teachers' role within the classroom. You know, we need to protect students' First Amendment rights, but First Amendment rights of teachers, they are left by the doorway when they come in when it comes to political standpoints or views on particular topics.
And I think a lot do, but I think a lot don't.
Yeah,
People are people.
Agreed.
But
All right.
in our specific discussion
Right.
about this
I'm done.
particular, thank you. I have a question about, I'm sorry, does anybody else have a question? Okay. I have a question about, have you looked at, as far as another source, another conservative media is The Bulwark, and I don't know if they have, you know, that's a combination of different.
Can you, what is that name again?
The Bulwark, BULWARK. They are, I'm not sure that they have children's programming, but that is another conservative. You know, if you're picking, I wouldn't want you to pick just from one or another. I mean, I'd want a combination. If you're really giving the education about slant, I would think that it would be important to do a bunch of different ones.
I can certainly pass that along to our
Yes,
library
right.
specialist, because she's trying to dig and find, and again, this is an option, this isn't mandated for every classroom to
Sure.
watch CNN
Right.
10. That's why we polled too as well, to see how many people use it, so we could, you know, be able to answer that for Mr. Clark as well and see what their opinions are with this piece, so.
I really liked in your report that I read on the last page, I liked the letter to, I assume this is from you, Drew, about the information to teachers.
It's not, but I'll take
Okay.
credit for it.
It's from our library specialist. I mean,
Okay,
this is her
well.
world that she lives in, and
I-
she was new to Wyndham Middle last year and has made a huge impact in engaging our students in reading and researching, and was grateful to have the opportunity to just, again, remind staff, like, this has come to light, and let's have a gentle reminder that discussion and feedback and hearing point of views are how we grow as individuals,
Right.
and respecting others' point of views.
I'd just like to read, if you don't mind, or if you.
Sure,
would
no,
read-
that's fine.
If you, says, when showing videos in the classroom, please provide time to discuss the content after showing a video. For example, if you show CNN 10 for current events, preview the content and then give time for students to share their viewpoints. We want to make sure a dialogue is provided so students can share various opinions. We want students to listen and hear different opinions in a respectful manner. If you are unsure of video content, please feel free to contact me. I'd be happy to preview and give you feedback. I really think that's
Yeah.
what we're all asking, and
Yep.
I appreciate that as a part of this. I'm very appreciative of the work that the high school library does as far as recognizing bias, and
Yep.
so and the training that they give children to. or
And that
students.
training has come down to, we began the research with the 8th grades last year, and that will be continuing down to our 6th graders.
great.
How to look at media, how to research reliable sources, and safe places for our kids to go. They love Google. Everything is ask Google a question,
Right.
and really getting them into, the Maine State Library databases where this is, this is material that's been researched and pieces like that. So it's a fascinating time for our students. As a mother of a incoming 8th grader and sophomore, there's a lot that they are preparing for, and they're writing and trying to process and cite, and where do you go for all that when it used to be go to the library, and some of the stacks moved, and that was the cool part of the day, and now it's at our fingertips. I'm dating
Right.
myself, I know, but,
Or whatever you were doing in the stacks.
Well, no, I assure you.
As a first grade teacher, you wouldn't know
I
that.
would-
So, they're also, I was reviewing the Common Sense Media lessons that we're rolling out this year for both 6th, 7th, and 8th, and there are many lessons that are targeted specifically for these topics in terms of looking at sources of data, spotting false claims. And so there is a lot of work, like Christine mentioned, but also with Common Sense Media to help our students with that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Scott has a question, of course. I don't mean, of course, it was Scott.
So out of the 38.5% that teachers that do use this CNN 10, I think the question was answered earlier, but I want to ask again anyway. Do we know if there is any type of follow-up with the 38.5%? What are those teachers doing with that content? Are they actually spending time engaging the kids, having them write up an argumentative piece or anything like that, trying to tie in some sort of other curriculum? What is happening once that 10 minutes is up?
So observations that I've made, I noticed one in a particular 8th grade classroom prior to this happening, and it was a teacher observation that I was completing. And the teacher had showed CNN 10 and then did have follow-up questions. Some of them just in terms of, where did this occur? Other ones really about, what are the two sides of this particular issue that's going on in this particular country? In terms of, do we have data to show, the percentage that's happening? It's not. I think we don't have that data. I would like to think as professional educators going through a teacher preparation system and then also the training here, that would be part of good instruction. Regardless of what's being shown, that they've previewed the material in advance. They found it to be appropriate, not only for the age group, but also relevant to the standards or what they would need to be teaching. And then with that, having follow-up questions, discussion, whether it's a reflection. But most teachers are using it on a fairly, each day as sort of a transition or an intro to a social studies class. There's, I think, a more use in that manner than sort of every couple weeks or every month.
Yeah.
Okay. So, taking that into consideration with what you had just said, I honestly don't see how this actually falls into the policy. I'm really not quite sure. I'm failing to draw the line. If we take a look at the policy, IJJ, C, D, E, and H. And I say H because I asked Mr. Clark earlier how many episodes he had actually watched. I've actually watched about 15 to 20 episodes. I really wanted to kind of figure out what this was all about. And there was a lot of content in there that I did not find to be accurate. There was a fair amount of content that I did not find to be accurate. I agree wholeheartedly with Mr. Clark as far as the media bias. As far as C, because there is not a lot of curriculum, it seems like there is not a lot of curriculum being done. This is kind of a filler for an intro to class, or coming into homeroom or something like that. I don't see how this supports the curriculum. I'm not understanding if they were saying, hey, listen, we're going to do an argumentative piece, so we're going to watch 10 minutes of CNN 10, and I want you guys to formulate an argumentative piece on what your feelings are of what you saw. But how can we honestly sit there and ask the kids to formulate an argumentative piece if we're only giving them one side of the story? And I really felt as though that a lot of times when I was watching some of these episodes, that there was really one side of the story. And then there's other stories that, 100-year-old woman was skydiving. Neonicotinoids are the primary cause of bee collapse. It costs, in Nepal, they're talking about raising the fees for climbing Mount Everest to 35,000 feet. I don't understand, how's that supporting the curriculum? These are my questions. So, those are the concerns that I have.
Okay,
C, D, E, and H.
all right. I appreciate those concerns.
Mhm.
And I think that we will have an opportunity to discuss those. This, however, I think is the time for the testimony. And if you have any questions of the people who are here, that's what we need to do. And then we
Okay.
will have an opportunity to discuss this, because I think that's an important distinction that you've made.
Okay.
Both of you have made about bias and about the curriculum itself, or the curriculum piece itself.
I did ask the question, though.
Yes.
I asked the question, and then I responded. So I do apologize if I kind of went on a soapbox.
But I think this shows why it's a two meeting process.
Yes,
Because
right.
I think that's very important to have a
Mr.
meeting
Clark did
process.
his piece, and we attended to his questions, and what the information we had, and towards our policy, and now it's up for discussion and more, the testimony, and now it's the next piece, and that's where it lies with you as a board to make a final decision on this piece. So,
I had an opportunity to look at a fair number too, and I'd love to discuss that with you.
Absolutely.
So, in any case, does anybody have any more questions about the process and the testimony?
No, thank you guys for
I really appreciate you bringing this up to us. I appreciate it, all the work. Okay. So now we are coming to RSU 14 Superintendent and Assistant Superintendent Planning.
I'm going to give out some handouts.
Oh, goody, handouts.
Passing those that way. I will. Well, some more artwork. Did I not? Yes.
I take the air out of the room.
No?
Okay.
Asked and answered.
I handed down enough. That was a guess by fingertip feeling.
Can you tell me?
this is plenty, I just gotta get them.
Oh, yeah, that's 1.3.
It's a gift.
Thank you. There's even an extra one.
Oh, perfect.
For that person on the other side of Kate.
Right.
So thank you for giving Christine and I a little bit of time. You know, people have been joking with us that, of course, I had to hire another Christine, and trying to figure out which Christine is responsible for what. And I've also had to give the little backstory that I was actually named in honor of my grandmother, Christine. So there's a common theme that runs through all of these. Obviously someone that I'm quite proud that I had the distinction of being named after. But one of the questions that we received from board members and also received from administrators in some of our planning is that who's going to be responsible for what? And especially as we approach the year. We were fortunate as an RSU and then previously as a school department to have the same assistant superintendent for 17 years and have the same superintendent for 16 years. And I think the community, as well as administrators and buildings, got an understanding of who is responsible for what, and really kind of fell into a mode or a model, especially going into the school year. Well, you're superintendent now, of course, here are the things that you're going to be doing. And of course, you're a new assistant superintendent, here's the role. And when in fact it may not be the role. And so Christine and I have been working together and also have had a lot of time to think in my transition, who's going to be responsible for what. And I think this is also might be helpful for board members, community members, for our classroom teachers and support staff. Who do they go to for different issues? And so planning out the year. So I'm going to start on the right-hand side with me, and it looks like it's a giant blue bubble. But under my responsibilities of board development and communication, working to continue like I did last year for the board on district finances and budget development. I will be continuing to do that. Doing principal evaluations. This year we have the joy of negotiating all 3 labor contracts, which will be administrators, teachers, and support staff. And so as much as I would like to throw Christine into that, for those negotiations, I don't think that's fair after 24 days in the RSU to be able to ever do that. Done quite a bit of work with Bill Hansen over the last several years on improvements to building and grounds, so I'm going to continue to hold on to that. Athletics, and Christine and I had a great conversation about this afternoon. After being your high school principal for 7 years and dealing with many of the athletic issues as they came along, I'm going to hold on to that for a little bit of time, working with Rich on those, and then working on communication. And then in our office, we do a separation between professional staff employment, which are our classroom teachers and our OT, PT, our special education teachers, all those other ones on a teacher contract. And then traditionally, the assistant has done the support staff employment and had done those pieces. So going over to Christine's side of the bubble, Christine's going to be the first point of contact in the district for personnel issues. She'll be working on director evaluations and specifically for transportation and technology. To start, she'll be working with Bill and Seth and Matt Sear and the building principals on safety, security, and planning, support staff employment, and then working to support the supervision evaluation committee. What was interesting is going through the job descriptions, and believe it or not, in your job description, one of the things that you have for your superintendent and your assistant superintendent is that they have to have access to a reliable vehicle, which I thought was an interesting requirement within the job description. So
There may be a backstory somewhere.
there may be a backstory somewhere. I did have to push start Mr. Prince's car once, but
Well, there's always the
there's always a
Yeah.
backstory.
Yeah.
But looking at those 2 job descriptions, there's actually quite a mirror between the 2 of them. And one talks about responsible for district finances, the other one supports the superintendent in the implementation of district finances. And so looking through some of the kind of places where we'll be overlapping and doing some work on policy development together, administrative development, which means principal's call, there's an issue, assistant principal's call, director's call, there's an issue, overseeing and implementing the contracts, school construction, which we're going to be getting ready for a major project, so doing some sharing that. Community development, as far as celebrating the RSU and all the things that happen in the RSU and making sure the community knows what an outstanding job our staff's doing. Student matters, and then just educational leadership in general, providing that leadership to the district. So it kind of gives you a little bit of a rough sketch. I know it's a little different model than where we've been in the past. Marge had a question?
Just a quickie, unless
Sure.
I'm not seeing it here. Where does school nutrition fall?
So school nutrition would be under Christine, under the directors, with Jeannie.
Okay. I was just curious, because transportation had its own, technology had its own. No, I didn't want Jeannie to feel
Jeannie's
left
a
out.
well-run machine.
She is well-oiled.
Well-oiled, that's it.
Anna, did you have a question?
No, I just had an itch.
Okay. Itch question. Anybody else have a question, or?
So as we go into the year, and also we had a chance to meet with the school administrators. We had our 18 retreat this past Monday.
Wow.
Had a chance to do some goal setting with them, and our instructional goals that are in our goals that we're setting for the district this year, which we'll be sharing with the staff on opening day, really fall into two areas. One under instruction and instructional improvement, and how do we support classroom teachers to look at best instructional practices so that they can meet the needs of their students. And then the second goal, right out of the strategic plan, which is environment for learning. So how do we provide the absolute best environment in the RSU for our kids so that they have an environment they feel comfortable in, that they feel like they can express, that they have the support that they need, so that teachers feel comfortable supporting the needs of students, especially the diverse needs of students as they come in. And then how do we as a district really set those two things aside as this is really where we need to spend our time, this is where we really need to focus our energies on. And then how do Christine and I, and Christine and Lisa and the building principals, how do we then work to remove some of those barriers so that our teachers can focus on good classroom instruction and also providing that environment for our students. So we did some goal setting on Monday. The building principals and assistants and leadership teams are continuing to work on their goals through mid-September, and then they'll be sharing them back. We'll be going through some protocols as an administrative team, refining those and eventually bringing them to you as a board so that you can see how the individual school goals all mesh up to that overall district goal, because we are a system. I mean, we are a system that brings kids in. I think someone told me last week it's a class of 2032 that's coming in, which is hard to believe. And I think there's already a 2032 parents Facebook group.
Oh my
which,
goodness.
Let's buckle up. I mean, this is going to be a ride, but looking at how do we move kids throughout that system. So again, we've participated in some of those goal setting pieces, but just to help you understand how we're going to divide out duties and how we're going to divide out things, but also both of us are invested in every single thing that's on this page, and you're going to see a lot of crossover between the two of us because a little bit of time I've gotten to know Christine. That's kind of how we both operate. So questions about the bubbles or how we fall? Or
Go get them.
I think this is good information to have, and I will enjoy seeing how it goes throughout the year. Okay, now appointments. Could I have a motion, please?
I move to approve the following appointments for the 2019-2020 school year. Tammy McNulty, Technology Instructional Leader, Wyndham High School, KEGS 15, salary of $66,448. Jill Moore, Special Education Teacher, Wyndham High School, Masters, Step 5, salary $48,462. Chris Hayday, Special Education Teacher, Wyndham High School, Bachelor's, Step 4, salary $43,473. Sorry.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any public comment? Any board discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? No opposed, motion carries. Okay, district student handbooks.
I move to approve the district student handbooks.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any public comment? Any board discussion? Scott?
I just want to say that I think that whoever is putting these handbooks together has done a fantastic job. I have gone to all the schools and clicked on the links. I really like how there's a link embedded in a link embedded in a link. It really kind of takes you right down the rabbit hole sometimes. But they're really well done. So if you haven't had an opportunity to go into the school's website and take a look at the student handbook, it seems like a lot of things have really been thought out very well. So kudos to everybody who had an involvement with that.
Marge?
These handbooks, are these electronic? Are they going to go out to the students electronically? Are they going to be, is anybody going to receive a paper handbook, pamphlet, or however they
Sure,
call it?
that's a great question. There's only one building that I'm aware of right now currently that does a paper handbook, which is Manchester. The one thing that, and this is something I'd like to remind the public of, though the board votes on a handbook tonight to approve just the general concept, the RSU reserves the right to update handbooks constantly as policies change, as laws change, and those other parts. So even with the case of Manchester School, there are already elements within that handbook that since it went to press, I think it went in June, that have been updated and have changed, that the website reflects that. So I will always point parents back to the website because the websites will have the most up-to-date versions of handbooks. And so we do reserve the right at any time to make that change.
Thank you. Kate?
Well, I wasn't done.
Oh, sorry.
Well, I'm agreeing with you.
I know, but I have more.
Oh,
Do
Sorry.
you want to go?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to finish it. The ones on the website, the lunch fees are incorrect. Just so folks out there know that what is necessarily out there right now is not accurate. I think Jeannie said the new fee is, it's different.
Jeannie has
Different
this
schools.
week
it's
sent
not.
out a new link to building principals to update those numbers.
Okay, just so everybody out there,
Yes.
if they read it, I'm not going to be upset because I only have X amount in my kid's account, and by the way. Anyway.
okay.
Just to Marge's question about it all being electronic, is there a way to somehow get word home that if people want a paper copy, we would be happy to provide that? I mean, we just have to be very careful with the fact that not everybody has internet access at home.
So your school secretaries have a list of students that they need to print things for and send them.
Okay. So this would be one of those things that would be printed. Okay, thank you.
Great. Anyone else? Okay. It is it's moved and seconded. And we've had board discussion. All those in favor? Any opposed? No. I have a motion for Eric. Okay, now a field trip
Be
policy.
prepared for opposing sides.
Yeah.
I move to approve the first reading of field trip policy, IJOA.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any public comment or discussion?
Well, this actually will be one that will be put electronically into all of the handbooks because it's new. So that's the beauty of having things online.
What if you like to store paper, like to save?
Well, you know I'll print it out.
But
Okay.
then would it also be sent home? It would be printed to those students that don't have it, even where it's being added in?
So
I'm not.
Yeah, I know
trying to harp
exactly
on
what
it.
you're thinking, Kate, but your school secretaries are locked in with those
Okay.
family that need that, and they are meticulous.
Okay,
When
perfect.
pieces come out, the other thing is like, if you look at a listserv message, or Mr. Howell will explain to you how like a once-a-week listserv that will be coming, it will stay right on there, and that your secretaries are scanning to know which pieces need to get home, so.
Good.
So that means Manchester, seeing as theirs have already gone to print, so all of the students in Manchester will get one. Because you said that had already gone, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, that is correct. Can I just say one thing about the field trip policy? And I know we had a chance to do a brief board discussion on it at our last meeting, 1st of August, but just so that everybody's aware, there are some major changes within this policy. So one of the major changes is that we actually will now have an RSU 14 policy. prior, we had a Wyndham School Department one, and we also had a Raymond School Department one. And just so everyone in the public's aware, is that one of the agreements with consolidation is that policies that were not an RSU 14 policy, that the buildings would follow the previous policy from each district. So this is the first time we've had an RSU 14. This policy, I would encourage people to go on the website and take a look at it within the packets. Very comprehensive, and there is a significant focus towards water safety within this policy, and it's modeled on many of the lessons that were learned through policy development in Lewiston through the tragic loss of a student on a field trip. But it has been vetted by our adventure-based folks. It has been vetted by even our DARE officer to look at whether or not this would be workable. Even though this policy has not been in place, we've been using it for the overnight trips over the summer for football camps, soccer camps, for high school athletics, and it's a workable policy, and it really seeks to reduce the amount of liability to not only to our staff members but to parents throughout this policy. And so there have been some suggestions that came out of last. So Scott, we did add a piece under insurance for lodging required to have minimal insurance, and that's one of the things that the directors will need to take care of. Principals have all had a look at this, and it's comprehensive. It'll take a little bit of time getting used to, but again, it's for the protection of our students and our staff and making sure that those truly are great educational experiences that kids walk away from, and it's one of those things they carry for the rest of their life about the memories of that field trip and how it matches up.
Thank you. Any other questions? I'm just going to stay here for a while until pause. Okay. So all those in favor of the first reading? All those opposed? No opposed. The motion carries. Okay, the volunteer policy and procedures.
This is a companion to the field trip policy, and we kind of worked on a tandem. I believe, Christine, you wrote the draft, correct? This Christine, we gotta have like this
A
Christine.
nickname, I said a nickname.
This Christine, thank you, put together the draft. And we don't have one currently as an RSU, and this is kind of important given the world that we live in, that we really fine tune this policy. So I'll let Christine walk us through.
The bulk of this policy came from the suggestions from the MSMA sample. We looked at other examples from surrounding districts with their sample policies and decided on this language. The first exhibit, volunteer background information, there are no changes to other than formatting.
Mr.
From the original Wyndham policy that had this form. So individuals interested in volunteering in schools would fill out the background information, answer those required questions, and on the back side, provide their signature and assurance of those two statements. No changes there, other than RSU 14 has been inserted so that it's a joint policy. And then Exhibit 2 comes from the MSMA recommendation, the school volunteer agreement, where schools would insert their name. And there's a third piece that will need to be worked on collaboratively with the administrative team, and that's an RSU 14 volunteer handbook. So there's consistency in the language and the expectations K through 12 in the district across schools. There are a couple schools that have samples of their own. We want to get their input so that we can have a collaboratively developed district level volunteer handbook.
On page 2 at the bottom, it says the board will recognize volunteer service on an annual basis. Does that mean that if I volunteer, I can't volunteer, but anyway, say I volunteered in September, I would fill this all out and I'm covered through the remainder of that school year? Is that what that statement means?
Correct.
So
The other thing is, one thing we've talked about as a policy committee, and this was a while back, and I can't remember what year that it ended, but And I think Raymond did the exact same thing, and it may be back to the old Wyndham days, and I know Raymond did. The volunteers were recognized. There was a celebration, there was a thank you, there was a luncheon where the volunteers across the district were recognized for their hours. One of the things we've talked about is trying to bring that back so that we're recognizing the volunteers that come in and support our district. I think one of the difficult things within this policy is that we want the community to engage with us, but we want the community to engage with us safely. And we want to make sure that those who might be accompanying, whether it be students on a field trip or those who are volunteering in the classroom, are appropriate to be there, that they are safe to be there. And I think the other part, just from hearing from classroom teachers also, is that that the volunteer is providing a service and is not something that the teacher then has to do as another thing. So that everybody's kind of clear on what are the kind of the ground rules for volunteering, what are their roles, what are their responsibility. And the other part that I think you'll see in here that was a good topic of discussion for us is confidentiality. Because every kid has the right to a confidential educational experience. And when you bring someone in the classroom, they do not have the right to then talk about the behaviors of students or other things that happen in the classroom, to make sure that that's not the case. We did meet in the afternoon, our administrative team talk about the volunteer policy. We did also talk about some of the background check needs, and more so this is happening, most of the time you're seeing volunteers, it's at the younger levels. By the time they hit Wyndham High School, there's not a lot of volunteering that happens, maybe a few volunteer coaches, but especially at the younger grades, K1, we have a couple people here. There's a lot of people coming in and spending some time in classrooms, and so part of this, which has been the practice in the district, is that prior to people going into classrooms, prior to them going on field trips, is that we're doing a background check to make sure that there isn't a reason why this person's not appropriate for them to be with our students.
Okay, as part of that, the other piece of that was, if I went in September and I signed this, does that cover me for 1 year? Or do I have to, each year, like if I came back the next year, I'd have to fill this over? Okay.
And we will run a check on you again.
I go for it. I'll stay
And
on.
if there's questions or other concerns, we would want the building principal to have the conversation with the volunteer. And just so the public knows, not everyone gets the chance to volunteer. There are occasions where a background check comes back and it's not appropriate, and so we do our homework on that. And we want to make sure that kids are in a safe environment, staff are in a safe environment, and that volunteering's not getting in the way. And so, I would just ask, the full board to take a look at this prior to the next meeting. One thing we are trying to do is kind of fast track this a little bit, because field trip season will be coming up with fair season and other things with the younger grades and apple picking and some of those other early field trips that happen with our guys and gals. And so just to make sure that we're ready, but it will continue to be our practice to do the background checks that go along with this.
Okay.
And we want volunteers. So
Yes,
we
we
want people
surely
there
do.
to help out with our kids.
Question.
Scott?
How long does a background check typically take to complete?
I've never done one. I can find that out for you. It usually does not take that long, because through central office we can access the state database.
Okay.
That's how we do it. We have our own access.
All right. So you're not going to have a case where a parent is going to show up to chaperone for a field trip at the last minute, and all of a sudden, sure, just fill out this application and then we'll run the background check.
No, it needs to be done prior.
Okay.
And one of the things the policy is looking to make sure that we have into place is that there's an approved list that's accessible, and with the magic of Google Docs and some other pieces on how do we make that accessible to our principals and also to support staff in the office to make sure that everyone who may be going on a trip is an approved person. What we don't want is someone to show up, you're absolutely right, the day of a trip, and to be able to do this. I guess the one thing that would be difficult to police as an RSU is that On many of our trips, it's no secret the destination. And you may have a parent, because all the kids are riding the bus and going to, let's say, I don't know, what
Funtown.
orchard's Terrason's Orchard.
Yep.
And so parent goes to Terrason's Orchard to go pick apple with their kids. That's going to be a difficult one. That we'll have to manage that.
Okay.
A quick one. Should it be in here somewhere, once you find out pretty much how long it takes to do that security check, should it also be stated in here, if you plan on volunteering, you should fill this out 2 weeks prior? There should be just so people know. Otherwise, you'll be hearing from parents like 2 days before because Charlie came home and said, Mom, can you come with us? Anyway, so if it was in the policy, not the people read.
I know currently, because again, we're going off of previous policies for both districts because we don't have an RSU one. I know it's been the practice, and I'm just going to go to the younger grades now for RES and Wyndham Primary School, that teachers beginning of the year when they're having their parent meetings to say, anybody who wants to volunteer, here's the packet. RES, anyone who wants to volunteer, here's the packet, to try to get those out as early as possible so that parents can have those. And I'm just thinking back to my high school time. I really can't remember a parent volunteer going on a field trip. Even the chamber singers who do their trips and will have parents go.
You're not allowed to as a parent.
Correct. They're not chaperoning on the
They're not.
bus, right?
But
But parents are showing up at events and going to events.
But I can tell you there's been, because I have a lot of grandchildren, and there've been multiple times they've come home, and said, we're going apple picking next week. Can you come, Grumpy, can you come chaperone with us or whatever? So I think it would be nice if people had
Yep.
some kind of an idea, because not everybody gets to see, and I don't think it's just parents that go chaperone, because they have to work.
One of the things we talked about, though, since this is a new policy, and you vetted it now with the administrators, that now it's in their laps and it's their responsibility to communicate it to their staff, that it's really important, whether it's open house or whenever, to notify their folks that now's the time. Let's just, whether you think you're going to go or not, just get vetted so that we're all set and ready to go.
I think generally most of these background checks are usually completed within 24 hours. I was just talking about the extreme circumstances where somebody happens to show up and be like, here's my form. Are we boarding the bus in 10 minutes?
I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't.
For $100, we can expedite that background check.
Did you have a question?
No,
No.
still just playing with my hair. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, guys. Sit on my hands or something next time.
No, I knew that. I knew it was a hair adjustment. Okay,
Sorry.
so we will, we'll have some first reading next time, right? Okay, so could I have a motion to adjourn, please?
I move to adjourn.
Ooh, quick.
I object.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? All those opposed? It
We're
is
going here.
7:48. Are you writing that down?